For more from Cairo, we're joined by phone by Gamila Ismail, a journalist, activist, and politician. She's a candidate for parliament in the upcoming elections. And Gamila Ismail, thank you for being with us. What is the situation now, nearly midnight in Cairo? Where do today's events leave things?
Well, today was a very important day. It's sort of a conclusion to all of the violence that took place in the last week or so. Last Saturday, as you know, criminal attacks were made by the security against protesters in Tahrir, and this is why I had to stop and suspend my campaign. We're having elections in the next 72 hours. However, it was very important to be in Tahrir, which is the core of my constituency. All of these criminal attacks that took place were ended yesterday. There was a ceasefire, and protesters were still deployed at the entrances and exits of Tahrir. Today was the important announcement of two things, of a new cabinet assigned by SCAF, by the military, and another trans cabinet or trans council that's going to rule as well, headed by Dr. Baradei. I think the first one was faced by a lot of sarcasm, attacks and criticism from protesters, since rumors circulated last night and said that Dr. Ganzouri is going to be heading this cabinet, since he was someone who was at the prime minister back in the early 90s.
So Dr. El Baradei, the Nobel Prize winner, he is now going to head some sort of additional transitional group, and is that does that satisfy activists like yourself enough to go ahead with elections?
Yes, it does satisfy many people in Tahrir because they feel that at least their demands were met in terms of the fact that Dr. Baradei and the other two form this trans sort of government where the national forces agree upon and where the activists agree upon. Not everyone does agree, but I mean, basically it's much acceptable than all of these attempts made by SCAF during the last few months, whereby whenever there is a protest in Tahrir or there is a big demonstration here or there, they would start suggesting and putting forward some ideas and offers that are completely opposite to what the protesters want.
Let me just ask you this. Today, the White House did issue a statement urging the military rulers to speed the transition to civilian government, that it should have as much power as possible. One, was that widely reported in Egypt? And two, what was the reaction?
Well, what we read here was the Europeans' warning. I mean, I haven't read about the White House warning, but I read about the European warning. Maybe I missed the other one. However, I don't think in the middle of Tahrir, where close to 1.5 million were here today, I don't think that they really give attention to signs coming from abroad, because they are really involved in what's happening in Tahrir, and they really believe that like stepping 1 meter back means a big loss. I mean, even if they have an excellent statement from the U.S. administration or an excellent statement from the European Parliament or the European Union.
Well, Gamila Ismail, coming to us from Cairo, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We get another perspective now from Robert Malley, who worked in the National Security Council in the Clinton administration. He's now program director for the Middle East and North Africa at the International Crisis Group. And Rob Malley, welcome back here. So what do you make of the situation now, particularly after what Gamila Ismail just said?
Well, if in fact Mohammed El Baradei is going to be playing a significant role now in the coming period, that's a major concession by the military, which proves once again what has been a pattern, that the military will make a mini concession, and then there's more pressure from the street, and it gives more, and that's been happening basically since they took power. Let's wait and see exactly what the fine print and what Mohammed El Baradei's powers will be, but it would be a breakthrough which may diffuse the situation if in fact it's accurate.
Now, if it doesn't pan out, does it still appear to you as if the military council, the SCAF, is determined to just plow ahead with this plan, which is get to elections Monday and start some alternative process going here?
Honestly, I think the military doesn't have a plan, and I think that's been the other factor in all this. It's really zigzag, ad hoc policy. Part of it is understandable. They're not used to exercising power in a more or less democratic, open system. That's not the way they used to operate. They're trying to do what they can while holding on to their privileges. And if you want to take a step back, it's really the military is afraid of losing its power. The street is afraid of losing its revolution, and the Muslim Brotherhood is afraid of losing its one opportunity at winning an election, or at least doing very well in an election. And all three seem to be quite confused. But again, when the street speaks and when you have 1 million people in Tahrir Square, others do have to listen.
Even if by other reports it wasn't anywhere near
That's
1 million,
right.
but it certainly seemed to
Hundreds
fill
of
the
thousands
square.
are enough.
It
Yes.
certainly seemed to fill the square. So now the White House statement, parse it for us. What course of action was the White House urging on the military rulers?
First, I think if you look at when the administration speaks, it's looking at two things. How many people are on the street and how violent is the repression against them. When both of those reach a certain level, then the administration speaks publicly and more sharply. And what they're saying is transfer power to a civilian authority. Don't make all the decisions by yourself. You need a credible authority that's going to make it. Hold on to, keep a schedule for elections which is quick enough. They say expeditiously, which may mean Monday as they're supposed to be held, or maybe a short delay, not too much of a delay. So they're saying get on with the transition, don't hold on to power, give it to civilian authority.
But it raises the whole question about who would appoint the civilian authority.
And again, if Mohammed Bardai is the person they selected, they're choosing somebody who's credible enough with the people on the street and credible enough with the political parties that he may be the ideal choice. The military, we know, don't really trust him, but he was the consensus candidate, or appears to have been, because you want somebody who, without having electoral legitimacy, has political legitimacy.
And even though he wants to run for president, it would be an interesting development, because I understand earlier today, Bardai was quoted as saying, no one's ever contacted me.
Right. And again, I think it shows that the military doesn't really know what world it's in right now. I mean, it's used to having its own system, its own authority, and working behind closed doors. And now it expects that it's going to have popular support for what it does, and then it sees that at least a sizable portion of Egyptians, we don't even know if they're the majority, but a sizable proportion of Egyptians is talking back, resisting, and then they have to give in.
Finally, what kind of influence does the U.S. really have? Either, I mean, we heard what Gamila said about...
Wasn't even aware of this
yeah,
statement.
In terms of public opinion and in terms of the military.
Well, public opinion, you know, there is something about when the U.S. speaks, people tend to listen, even though they may be listening less and less. And second, the huge amount of military aid that the U.S. gives, and which it gives now to the party that is making the decisions, the SCAF. So that's where the U.S. has influence. But the resonance it has, it's only relative. And frankly, if you're in Egypt today, if you're the military, you're looking at two things: your prerogatives and what's happening on the street. And what the White House says matters, but it comes in a distant third.
Well, Rob Malley, International Crisis Group, thank you.
Thanks for having me.